Welcome back, students. We just got done talking about the use of religion in ethics, and now we're going to talk about another ethical theory called egoism. Now, it's rooted in something called psychological egoism, and that's basically the idea that people ultimately do what they want to do. They pursue their own self-interest exclusively. That's a claim about what people actually do. Ethical egoism, however, is a claim in what people should do. Now, it's like I said, it's rooted in psychological egoism. And this view of ethical egoism claims that each person ought to pursue his or her own self-interest exclusively. And the key figure here, or one of the key figures here, is Ayn Rand. She's known as the author of Atlas Shrugged, and she also wrote a book called The Virtue of Selfishness. So basically, egoism is the morality of selfishness. People should act selfishly, it says, and other people matter only for what they can provide to us. Now, this obviously flies in the face of something called altruism, which is the belief in and practice of selfless concern for others. Let's talk about some arguments for and against egoism. First of all, an egoist will say that altruism is ultimately self-defeating. And they'll say that altruism also leads to a denial of the self, and we shouldn't deny the self. We are ourselves. And third, there are some people who argue for egoism, kind of a toned down version, that say it's compatible with common sense morality. Now, what are some arguments against egoism? Well, first of all, the critic of egoism will say that it has the potential to endorse wickedness. If it's in my self-interest to commit some heinous crime, egoism would say, go ahead. And we don't want to endorse wickedness, the critic will say. Also, egoism is logically inconsistent. And third, egoism is unacceptably arbitrary. What do we do when my selfish interest conflicts with yours? Egoism can't help us resolve that dilemma. So it's arbitrary. Now, another theory is called the social contract theory. This is the basic idea. To escape from tearing society apart, we must work to find a way to work together. In a stable and cooperative society, we can produce more goods and distribute them evenly. But it's not easy to establish this type of society. Therefore, people must agree on the rules to govern their interactions. And basically, this agreement and these rules are the social contract. Now, it is a very important part of the social contract is reciprocity. The social contract is only possible if everyone agrees to the same rules. Hence, it's called a contract. And the key figure here was Thomas Hobbes. Now, some of the advantages to the social contract theory, it says which rules we need to follow. They're basically the ones that facilitate harmonious living. It also says why we should follow them, because we benefit from living in a place where these types of rules are accepted. It also, another advantage is that it says what others will do, or they'll be punished. They agree to keep up their end of the bargain. That's part of the contract. And finally, another advantage, the last advantage to the social contract theory, is that it says what morality demands of us. It demands that we live by the rules and punish those who don't. So these are the advantages of social contract theory, but it also has disadvantages. For example, it makes civil disobedience a tricky case. People like Martin Luther King and Gandhi were known for going against the government. Although there is a way out of that by saying that the social contract, part of an important ingredient of it is that it provides benefits for the people who agree to live by it, for the members. And someone like Martin Luther King Jr. or Gandhi for the Indians could say that blacks or Indians weren't benefiting from the social contract, and therefore the party with whom they had the contract made it null and void by not holding up their end of the bargain. So that's a way that civil disobedience and the social contract theory can coexist. A second disadvantage of the social contract theory is that it may be seen as an imposition. It may impose values on people who never signed up to live by those values. Now, there's a way out of that one too, but that's unimportant at this stage. But the third one is the main disadvantage. That's the main problem with this social contract theory, and that's that it fails to take into account people who can't benefit us in tangible ways, like children, or the elderly, or the disenfranchised, or even future generations. There's no goods or services that these people offer us, the social contract critic will say. So to consider what's moral, a matter of this mutual exchange just doesn't work for these types of people. But morality still has to take them into consideration. So that's a third disadvantage to the social contract theory, and in my opinion, the most kind of devastating criticism of the theory. Now let's talk about utilitarianism. This basically says that morality is about making the world as happy as possible. Shiny, happy people. Here's the catchphrase: greatest good for the greatest number. And it basically says you'll find out what's moral by balancing the good and bad results, and the consequences are what matter for utilitarianism. And another central feature of it is that everyone's happiness counts the same. There's no privileged people in utilitarianism. Everyone counts the same. It's really a radical idea because of what it left out. It left out all references to God or abstract principles. That's one of the reasons it's a radical idea. And some of the key figures are Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. That picture on the right there, the drawing, that's John Stuart Mill. On this page we'll see Jeremy Bentham. So let's talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages. First of all, it kind of resonates with us. We agree that pain is bad and happiness is good. All else being equal, that sounds kind of right on. Also, it doesn't have to rely on vague abstract principles. And a third advantage is that it leads to impartiality, fairness, and social harmony. Now, disadvantages include these. It potentially endorses wickedness. For example, slavery would be justified if it benefits many people, and those outweigh the misery of just a few. Now that's an extreme case of utilitarianism, but it's still a criticism that can be leveled against the idea itself. And a second disadvantage or criticism is that it can't account for special obligations to family and friends, since in utilitarianism everyone matters equally. Certainly all of us take a different view with our family and friends, and we give them special treatment, and that's just a feature of society. That's something feminism will have something to say about, that utilitarianism just can't handle. Absolutism. The basic idea here is that some actions are always wrong. You can see that in the title, absolute. No matter what. The ends do not justify the means in these cases. Moral rules are absolute. And the key figures here are Immanuel Kant and Elizabeth Anscombe. They're on the right. Keep in mind here the categorical imperative. Kant said this. This is how you find out which rules are absolute. He said, act only according to that maxim by which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. Only do things, in other words, to paraphrase, only do things that you could decide that if everyone did it, it would be a good thing. Now the advantage here is it gives us an answer to the subjective-objective question. Morality is objective here. A disadvantage of absolutism is that it doesn't take into consideration that moral values might come into conflict with one another. For example, when lying might save someone's life. There were stories of Germans who harbored Jews in the midst of the Holocaust, and lied to people when German soldiers came up to their house asking if they were harboring people. What if lying might save someone's life? That's a disadvantage to absolutism. It doesn't account for those tricky situations. Now, Kant was interested in absolutism largely because of his view of humans. He thought humans were endowed with reason and morality, both of which separate us from the animals. And that's why it's always wrong, absolutely wrong to break a moral rule. It's an affront to human dignity. It makes us as bad as, or as low as, animals. And ethics of care. The basic idea in the ethics of care is that men have wrongly discriminated against women, whose voices are vital in philosophy. And so women emphasize that the moral life is a network of close, small-scale relationships with specific people. In an ethics of care, the idea of living well is caring for those people, attending to their needs and maintaining their trust. Now, this ethic appeals to intuition and feeling rather than abstract principles. And just as a sidebar, this is really third wave feminism at its finest. Second wave feminism had said that there are no differences between men and women. Third wave feminism points out, yeah, maybe there are, because maybe women can see things that men can't. If we say there's no differences, then we can't say that women see things that men can't. So this is third wave feminism at its finest, and one central figure here is Carol Gilligan, pictured there on the right. Now, the advantages of an ethics of care is that it resonates with us. We want to be cared for. And it shifts the focus away from mere conduct, towards character. And it's a game changer in this regard. All the other previous theories talked about doing one's duty and character, or doing one's duty and the conduct rather than the character or the type of person it is. Now, the disadvantages of an ethics of care is that intuition and feeling have been notoriously unreliable in the past. Slavery and the subordination of women, again, are good examples. And if an ethics of care promotes the idea that morality is about a network of close relations, well, that doesn't help us. That doesn't help the starving children in Africa, who we should still be concerned for. We should be concerned for people we don't know, and that's a disadvantage to the ethics of care. And finally, virtue ethics. The basic idea here, like the ethics of care, is that morality is about being the right type of person more than doing the right type of things. You will do the right types of things once you have cultivated the type of personality, the type of habits, the type of virtues that virtue ethics endorses. And the key figures here are Aristotle, and again, Elizabeth Anscombe was one of the people who brought this back to the forefront in the mid-20th century. So this is the definition of a virtue. A trait of character manifested in habitual action that is good for anyone to have. It's often the midpoint between two extremes. So for example, with generosity, that's considered a virtue. That's a midpoint between absolute stinginess on the one hand and frivolously giving everything away on the other. Generosity is the virtue that's in the midpoint of those two extremes. Now, what are some advantages? First of all, virtue ethics gives moral motivation. Doing our duty, as in all the other theories, seems too cold. Second, all these other theories assume that we have, some view from nowhere that we can judge these things from. So there are doubts about impartiality. Can we really expect that a parent will be impartial about her own children? Probably not. And another advantage, in my opinion, is that it, instead of about conduct, it's about character. And the right conduct flows out of having the right character. Now, there are some disadvantages to radical virtue. If you take this theory far enough, radical virtue doesn't tell us why we should be virtuous. And it also doesn't tell us how to apply it to difficult cases. And radical virtue doesn't tell us how to handle moral conflict. So, for instance, honesty and kindness are both virtues, but if a spouse says to another spouse, "Do I look good wearing this outfit?" Honesty and kindness may come to clash if the other spouse does not think that she or he looks good in that outfit. So in conclusion, all of these theories seem to wrestle with the problem of objectivity and subjectivity at some level. And in my opinion, no one has really come up with a great answer to that problem that's free from criticism. So maybe you're the philosopher to do it. In conclusion, we should strive to be ethical, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, which makes those of us who love absolutes, like myself, very uncomfortable. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them by shooting me an email or by giving me a call. Thank you very much.